On a green and silent island, Sinbad knelt by a stream to help a frail old man across. The old man climbed onto his shoulders, and then his legs clamped around Sinbad's throat like a vise of iron and would not come off. For days the thing rode him like a beast, driving him through the trees with its heels. And Sinbad came to understand a slow and certain truth. No one this creature had ever climbed walked free again. From the world of the Arabian Nights told by lamplight on Nightfall Tales, the fifth voyage of Sinbad the Sailor. Rich and restless once more, Sinbad bought a ship of his own and put to sea. This voyage would bring him a giant's vengeance out of the sky, a wreck under falling mountains, and the clinging horror that very nearly rode him into his grave. Dim the lamp. This time Sinbad did not merely buy a share of someone else's cargo. He bought a whole ship, hired a master and crew, and filled the hold with goods to trade. He was his own man on his own deck, and for a while the sea was generous. They moved from port to port, buying and selling, until they anchored at a green, uninhabited island to rest. There, rising from the trees, the merchants found an enormous white dome, smooth and seamless, taller than a house. They circled it, marveling, prodding it, wondering what treasure such a thing might hold. But Sinbad had seen its like before, on an earlier voyage, and the sight of it turned his blood cold. "Leave it," he told them. "Touch nothing. That is no dome. It is an egg, and the bird that laid it is larger than the clouds. If it returns and finds its young disturbed, none of us will see tomorrow." The merchants laughed at the old sailor's fear. To them it was a curiosity, a story to bring home. They did not believe a bird could blot out the sun. While Sinbad pleaded with them to put back to sea, the merchants fetched axes from the ship. They struck the great egg until the shell cracked and split, and inside they found the rock's chick, a young bird already vast, half-formed and helpless. The men dragged it out, killed it, and built a fire on the shore, and soon the smell of roasting meat drifted up into the evening air. They ate and laughed and praised their own daring. Sinbad would not touch a bite of it. He stood apart at the water's edge, watching the sky, his heart hammering. He knew what they had done. They had not found a marvel. They had committed a murder, and the parents would come to collect the debt. As the sun sank, the light began to fail too quickly, as though something were passing in front of it. A shadow swept across the beach, then another, and from far out over the sea came a sound none of them had ever heard, a scream of grief and fury, vast enough to shake the leaves from the trees. The two rocks came out of the dusk like falling mountains. Their wings darkened the whole sky. The wind of them flattened the fire and threw men to the ground. They circled the island once, screaming over the broken shell and the bones of their child, and then they climbed, up and up until they were specks. And Sinbad understood and ran for the ship, screaming at the others to cast off. The merchants scrambled aboard and rowed for open water, praying they could outrun what was coming. They could not. High above each rock carried in its talons a boulder the size of a house, torn from some far mountain. The first stone fell and split the sea beside them. The second struck the ship dead amidships. The vessel burst apart like a dropped cup. The mast, the hold, the men, all of it gone in an instant of splinters and white water. Sinbad was flung clear, and his hands closed on a floating plank, and the current took him. Battered, half-drowned, the only living soul left of his proud ship and all its crew. The sea carried Sinbad for a day and a night and cast him, more dead than alive, onto the shore of another island. And this one seemed a paradise. Fruit hung heavy from every branch. A stream of clear, sweet water ran down through the green. Birds sang where no danger seemed to live. Sinbad drank and ate, and slowly his strength came back, and he began to walk inland, thanking God for his deliverance. By the bank of the stream he came upon an old man sitting alone, feeble, white-haired, wrapped in a cloak of leaves, looking up at Sinbad with sad and pleading eyes. The old man could not seem to speak. He only gestured at the running water, and then at his own thin legs, and made signs that he wished to be carried across to the fruit trees on the far side. Sinbad's heart went out to him. Here, he thought, was one more castaway like himself, marooned and helpless. He bent down, took the old man gently onto his shoulders, and waded into the stream. The moment Sinbad reached the far bank and stooped to set the old man down, everything changed. The thin legs that had seemed so feeble whipped tight around his neck and locked there, hard as wood, strong as iron, crushing his throat until the world went dark at the edges. The old man would not come down. Sinbad clawed at the legs, heaved and twisted, threw himself to the ground, but the grip only tightened, and a heel drove into his side like a spur, ordering him up. Choking, terrified, Sinbad staggered to his feet again, and the creature on his shoulders made a low, satisfied sound and gestured toward the nearest fruit trees. There was nothing to do but obey. Sinbad walked where he was driven and reached up and picked the fruit the old man pointed to, and the thing ate it greedily and gestured again. Onward, always onward. By nightfall, Sinbad understood the trap he had walked into with his own kindness. The harmless old castaway by the stream was no man at all. He had made himself a beast of burden, and the rider on his back had no intention of ever getting down. What followed, Sinbad could barely bring himself to tell. Day after day, the creature rode him. It never loosed its legs, not to let him rest, not to let him sleep, not even to spare him its filth. It fouled him where it sat and dug in its heels and drove him on. By day it steered him through the woods to whatever fruit it craved. By night its grip never slackened, and Sinbad slept, when he slept at all, on his feet with the weight still crushing him. His back bent. His legs went raw. His mind began to come apart under the endless burden. And one day, driven into a grove he had not entered before, he saw what waited at the end of this road. Scattered across the ground lay the dry white bones of other men. Men who had come ashore as he had, who had pitied the old man by the stream, who had carried him until their hearts burst and their bodies failed. The creature had ridden every one of them to death. Sinbad was simply the next horse, and he knew that unless he found a way, very soon, his bones would whiten there beside the rest. It was the fruit that saved him. Driven one day through a stand of vines heavy with ripe grapes, Sinbad gathered a great quantity and stuffed them into a large dried gourd he found split open on the ground, and stopped it and left it in the sun. Days later, returning to that place, he found the gourd had filled with wine, and Sinbad, wretched and despairing, drank deep of it, and for the first time in weeks the misery lifted and his steps grew light. He laughed and even danced a little under his terrible burden. The creature on his shoulders watched and grew curious, and made signs that it wanted the gourd. Sinbad gave it up. The old man drank and drank again, draining it greedily, and the wine went straight into his head. His legs for the first time began to loosen. His grip went slack. He swayed. He slumped. And Sinbad, feeling the iron go soft around his throat, seized the moment he had prayed for. He wrenched the creature off his shoulders, flung it to the ground, and snatched up a great stone, and made certain, for the sake of every man whose bones lay in that grove, that the old man of the sea would ride no one ever again. Free at last, lighter than he had been in a lifetime, Sinbad made his way to the coast and was taken aboard a passing ship by sailors who could scarcely believe he lived. For they knew the old man of the sea, and knew that no one he climbed had ever returned. They carried Sinbad to a great harbor city, and there he learned the strange trade of the place. Tall coconut palms whose nuts grew far out of reach, harvested by pelting the apes in the high branches with stones until the furious creatures tore loose coconuts and hurled them back down. Sinbad threw stones and gathered the fallen coconuts day after day, traded them for pepper and aloes wood and ivory, and slowly, voyage's end by voyage's end, rebuilt the fortune the rocks had sunk. At last he found a ship bound homeward and sailed for Baghdad, richer than he had set out and carrying a weight no gold could measure. The memory of the thing on his back, and the grove of bones, and how close he had come to joining them. He swore once more that he would never sail. But the sea is patient, and it had not finished with Sinbad yet. That is the fifth voyage of Sinbad the Sailor. The voyage of the rock's revenge and the old man of the sea, the kindness that nearly killed him, and the cup of wine that set him free. They told it by lamplight to remember that mercy can be a trap, and that the heaviest thing a man carries is not always on his back. If you have sailed this far into the night with him, stay a while longer. 2 voyages remain, the strangest of all, a mountain of wrecked ships, a river that runs into the dark under the world, and one last journey Sinbad never meant to take. Subscribe, light the lamp again after nightfall, and we will sail the 6th voyage of Sinbad together.